What you hear in this video, you hear nowhere else. Who is God? What do you know about its origin? You just think about 90% people on the planet believe in God. Almost 65% of them, these are Christians and Muslims. This 4.5 billion people. That is, representatives of faith in one God, not in different gods. The so-called monotheistic religion. Ask yourself, or priest, about the origin of God, and you will hear something like that.
Okay, this is Denise who says, where did God come from?
Well, in the beginning, God. That's all you can tell. Where did he come from? Before there was anything that had a beginning, God was already there. That's what the Bible says, all right.
God was not created, he was not concocted, he was not manufactured. God existed before any beginning. He always has been and he always will be. There's a word we use for it, it's eternal.
Jesus is eternal. He has no beginning and no ending. He has always been and always will be.
In other words, no one knows anything about the God that everyone believes. And moreover, even the thought that God has a blasphemous beginning. They are forbidden, albeit in the 21st century. And such a person, even today, many are ready, figuratively speaking, burn at the stake. Well, someone can object to us and say that, I don't care where he came from. It is important for me that I know that there is a God, that God created everything, created man and so on. Okay, but in such a worldview system, the question appears, how did evil appear in the world? You will hear one answer. There was such an angel, Lucifer. He fell away from God and became Satan and began do evil. In another video, I will touch on the issue of the origin of Satan. But for now, I'll just say that in the Bible there is not a single place that speaks of a fallen angel. There is no such place. But even if it were, how the good God created a creature that was previously predisposed to evil. Because it means that evil existed before the fallen so-called angel. If God created everything, then he had to create evil. And if he created evil, then he is not as good and kind as they tell us. And if he is not so good and kind, then why does everyone believe in such a God? And now, to the point. My attention was drawn to the fact, in the Bible in Hebrew, or as it's called in the Masoretic Bible, the word Elohim is written more than 2,500 times, which translates as gods. This word's in the first verse of the Bible. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. In Hebrew is the word Elohim. That is, God did not create, but the gods created. But in all further translations, the word gods was replaced by a single number, the word God. Although in Hebrew, the word God in the singular also exists, and it's translated as El or Elo. And, if the ancient author believed that everything was created by one God, he could write the word God in the singular. But the truth is that, in ancient times, no one believed in one single God. Remember, for example, the Egyptian pantheon of the gods, people believed in many gods. This faith in many gods found its imprint in the Bible. This is especially vividly indicated by 82 Psalm. God has become a host of gods, among the gods pronounced judgment. In Hebrew in the Masoretic text, this phrase, God has become a host of gods, sounds like
Elohim nitzav ba'ad El,
which translates as, the gods became in the assembly of El. God El is the most supreme God, the Khan's pantheon of gods. It will be discussed in detail a little later. So, we can see that even the ancient Jewish people believed in many gods, among which Yahweh was one of these gods. Especially, eloquently speaks about this place, from the book Deuteronomy in the 32nd chapter in the 8th verse, it is written, when the Most High divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people, according to the number of the children of Israel. This phrase, according to the number of the children of Israel, was originally distorted to hide the faith of ancient Israel in many gods. And in Greek texts dating from the 4th century AD, this phrase is translated as, angels of God. That is, not the sons of Israel, but the angels of God. And it puts a completely different meaning in the text. Radically different. But what's even more interesting is that, in the oldest scrolls of the Bible in Hebrew, which dates back to the 2nd century BC, the so-called Qumran scrolls. So, in these scrolls, instead of the word children of Israel, as the word children of Elohim. And by the word Elohim, as we recall, the ancient Jews meant the gods. That is, the phrase was originally written as sons of God. Also, it is worth saying that the word, the Most High, which stands at the beginning of this verse, describes again the same supreme God El. Because, in Hebrew, the Most High sounds like Elyon. And as we see, this word consists of his name, God's name, Elyon. If you read this verse first, it will turn out like, when the El divided to the nations their inheritance, when he separated the sons of Adam, he set the bounds of the people, according to the number of the sons of God. It radically changes the meaning of this verse. It turns out that it is not written about people, not about the sons of Israel, about the gods. And that verse 8 was originally just like that, say the next verse 9. It is written there, for the Lord's portion is his people. Jacob is the lot of his inheritance. In this verse, under the word Lord is the word Yahweh in Hebrew. And it turns out then that, when Supreme God El set the boundaries of the people, then he divided the peoples according to the number of children of the gods. And Yahweh, as one of the gods, went to Jacob, that is, the Jewish people. And all other nations were divided among other gods. This question remains very strange that after the flood of Noah and his family adhered to the belief in one God. But for some reason, the father of Abraham, Farah, did not believe him. Even though at the time Abraham was born, Noah was still alive. How is this even possible? Especially in that strict patriarchal time when everything was transferred from generation to generation, which was holy, kept their traditions, their faith. If the oldest father was alive, then he had to pass on his knowledge to his son, and he passed it on to his son, and so it was to go up to Abraham. In this system, this religious line was to be followed, as it, for example, has been observed for thousands of years by the Jewish people, and to this day. But the Bible says it's not. And Abraham was essentially the only person on earth who believed in one God. This is extremely strange. And fact is that in ancient times, not 65%, but 99% of the world's population believed in many gods. How did it happen that today 65% believe in that God in whom several thousand years ago no one believed? Is it not logical that if this God had very few followers, then this religion should have died out? But the fact is that now people do not believe the Baal, not the God Ra, but precisely the one God. This is another paradox, tells us that, in itself, this couldn't happen, which means that faith in one God is imposed, or in other words, was established artificially. Now, back to the question of the origin of God. At a certain time, God said to Abraham, "Get out of the Mesopotamian city of Haran, and go where he will direct him." Noteworthy is the fact that was written in the Jewish Midrash texts not included in the official Bible, since these texts were recorded much later than the Old Testament itself. And so, according to Yeast, when Abraham was only 3 years old, he looked at the sunset and realized that there is a God above all this. I ask you to note that Abraham received this revelation when the sun went down, and hereafter, God tells him to leave the Sumerian land and go west. At the entrance to the land of the Bedouin, so to speak, he meets the priest Melchizedek, to which he tithes from all that he has, and who was sent to him from that same God. And now, the most important thing. Melchizedek is called the king and priest of Salem. It is Melchizedek who is the key figure who breaks the light on the origin of God to us. Since the God of Melchizedek is also the God of Abraham, it remains for us to find out who the God of Melchizedek is. Of course, there is no mention in the Bible, but it says that Melchizedek, he is the king and priest of the city of Salem. That is, in the city of Salem, there was a cult of that God, who brought Abraham out of the interfluve. In ancient times, it was believed that all cities were built by gods, or God whom in this city worshipped, and whose name is this the city was called. Historical fact suggests that the city of Salem is Jerusalem. Jerusalem in translation sounds like founded by Salem. You can read about this Wikipedia. This is accessible information. Namely, the ancient city of Jerusalem, the holy city, was a city god Salem, or Shalom, or Shalimu. There are options, sound. Imagine, before the Yahweh cult was proclaimed in Jerusalem, existed in it the cult of the god Salem, whose priest was Melchizedek, who blessed Abraham. And most interesting, Abraham accepted this blessing because he believed that Melchizedek is a servant of the same God who revealed himself to Abraham. Now let's look further. What do we know about God Salem? During excavations of the ancient city of Ugarit, found texts from which it becomes clear that in the land of Canaan there was a pantheon of gods. The supreme god was the god El. The god El born 70 gods, including he gave birth to Salem. But not only him, Salem was not born alone. He was born with his twin brother Sheher, and these two gods were the gods of the morning dawn and the evening dawn. Sheher was the god of the morning dawn, and Salem was the god of the evening dawn. Remember the moment when Abraham received the revelation of one God, looking exactly at the sunset. It is worth recalling the fact that Jesus Christ was born of Bethlehem at sunset, when the first star appears. This is a very interesting coincidence, don't you think so? And the fact that Jesus went all the time to pray to the mountain of God El. It also looks very strange somehow. Of course, they can say that the name of God has long been known. This is Yahweh, the name that God revealed to Moses when he appeared to him. But what's interesting, the name Yahweh is not a name, but translates as, I am the one who exists. That is essentially a God. To the question of Moses, what is your name, answered, I am the God who exists. This means that he didn't tell his name to him, and not in vain, since the most important god at that time was Baal, also the son of El. The cult of Baal, the Jewish people tried all their history to exterminate. The god Baal was the most powerful god at that time, and therefore his cult was the most widespread, and most likely, if Yahweh introduced himself to Moses as Salem, then no one would listen to him. After God brought the Jews from Egypt to the desert, near Mount Sinai the people erected a calf for him. Well, you remember this story about the golden calf. What provoked the anger of Yahweh, and Yahweh ordered the killing of about 3,000 people. But Taurus was a symbol of the most powerful god at that time. And this shows that the Jews thought they were led by the most powerful God. And Yahweh kept repeating that, I am God of gods, and Lord of lords, says that, for his party showed them his superiority over other gods. Because if there were no other gods, then there would be no need to prove anything to anyone. Need to consider another remarkable and very eloquent fact, the emergence of monotheism in antiquity. Oddly enough, it occurs approximately at the same time period between the period of Abraham and Moses, and in the same region, in Egypt. Not all, Egypt's 1,000-year-old religion ceases to exist, Pharaoh Akhenaten. By the way, his wife was the well-known beauty, Nefertiti. So, Pharaoh Akhenaten forbade the worship of gods other than one god. The name of this god is Atun, and this god is also directly related to sunset. Atun was portrayed as a disk with extending rays that can be seen when the sun rises or sets. And although the supreme god was the Ra, who was the god of the sun, Akhenaten suddenly selects the minor god of the sun Atun, and makes everyone worship him. Of course, with the death of Pharaoh, this cult ceased, but the fact that it was an attempt of great ancient monotheism empire, and the fact that a secondary god associated with the sun was chosen draws parallels, again with the sunset god, with Salem. And now, it's worth saying that, in the Bible there are references to the fact that the ancient Jews they understood who the god of sunset and the god of sunrise were, Salem and his brother Sheher. In the famous verse, in chapter 14 is written, Eudenes, son of dawn. In Latin, it put sounds like Lucifer, whence came the name of Satan. Although in this passage, it is not just about Satan that is said about his son, about the son of Satan. In Hebrew it is written, Halel Bain Shaker. Namely, and you are the Halel son of the Sheher. That is, Isaiah writes about the god Sheher and his son Halel, about whom we know nothing at all. And in other places from the Bible, which shows that Sheher is Satan. I'll tell you in another video about the origin of Satan, but for now, I'll say that the Sheher, as far as we remember, this is the twin brother of Salam or Yahweh. In this video, it becomes clear that everything is very confusing and everything is not so clear and understandable as we are told in the church, since the prize church that all the gods did it would have to admit life in other worlds. And the most important fact is that humanity is far from the most developed form of life, how we are accustomed to consider ourselves. I would have to admit that the whole civilization was given to people by the gods. Yes, and they themselves created people, and still maintain their cult on earth in many ways. It is also worth adding that the word Salam in Hebrew is written as SLM, today known as Shalom, that is the peace. Shalom Aleichem, peace to you. As in Islam, Assalamu Alaikum. And even the words Islam are likewise the same root word Salam, since it contains the same consonant letters. And as you probably know, in Hebrew until a certain time, there were only consonants. That is, in fact, the name of the god Salam is now pronounced much more often than any other name, since it is a usual greeting in the East. And exactly such a god is really more understandable to people and corresponds to the behavior of the god Yahweh in the Bible. Because Yahweh is angry, he kills, he has mercy, he punishes, he acts like a man, he is jealous. That is, he has the same emotional characteristics which are inherent in our intelligent beings. And this already indicates the absence of impartiality in him. And that absoluteness, as the church asserts, the basis of just on that opinion, that God should be like that. And in the case of Salam, then it becomes clear why God doesn't destroy Satan. It's also clear that he didn't create evil, and it already existed before human history. And most likely even before the divine story of which we know nothing. What can we conclude? Humans were created by the gods, and not the only God Yahweh. Yahweh's ancient name is Salam, or Shalom, or Shalimu. He has a twin brother, Sheher, which is the so-called Lucifer. Yahweh himself is a minor god in this pantheon, but it was he who inexplicably was able to turn the system of the pantheon of gods and make the faith of a little Jewish tribe has grown into a dominant faith in the modern world, in which he already worships not 600,000 people, but 4.5 billion. Agree, this speaks of the considerable qualities of Yahweh. Therefore, believers can certainly be fully proud of their God. He is quick-witted and entrepreneurial. But now, a different question arises. Of course, there are a lot of questions, but one of them is, why does he need so many believers? What is he collecting for himself? But more about that in another video.